Welcome back to Jay's Smokehouse. I am joined by Janna Champagne, Professor of Cannabis Medicine and retired nurse yet again. And I'm so excited to dive into, I haven't let her know anything that we're going to talk about yet because I just wanted to dive into the conversation here. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is how you became a professor of cannabis medicine. And can you explain to those who might not know what that means?
Yes. So what that means is that I work for a university and I have created one and I have a second course launching in January that are both on the topic of medical cannabinoid science. And I teach these courses to integrative and functional and nutrition degree students at John Patrick University, and they're Department of Education approved. People get college credits for completing my courses. So it's a legitimate role as a professor, which is pretty cool. Yes. So, and as far as how I became a professor, that's a much longer story. And it actually started, unbeknownst to me, it's actually started in my 20s when I replaced my alcohol habit with cannabis. I lived in California, just south of Humboldt County. And that was a really good change for me because I come from a long line of alcoholics and I could have really easily taken that path instead. And so I'm thankful for that. But I, got a little older, got married, got pregnant, stopped using cannabis, entering nursing school. There was a lot of stigma and we weren't allowed to use it. We were drug tested. So I had kind of set it aside as, a recreational thing. And in 2012, I was working as a nurse at an acute care hospital. My history there was, post-surg, ortho, neuro, and also critical care cardiac. I was working in the cath lab, also working full-time as a graduate student towards my master's degree to become a nurse practitioner. And I suffered a complete health collapse. And about a year into my health collapse, I was pretty disenchanted with my progress. My diagnoses included things like lupus and a lot of other things. I had systemic failure in my pancreas and my liver. My neurological system was really inflamed. I was very low functioning. And in fact, I was labeled totally and permanently disabled by my physician in 2013. And what I was seeking was something to manage my pain. As a nurse, I knew that going down the opioid pain pathway for chronic condition like I had, where the pain wasn't fleeting or post-op or something like that, was not a good idea. I had seen what happened to patients that chose that path. And so I was very motivated to find an alternative.
What happened to those patients that chose that path?
The patients that choose opioids for chronic pain, for long-term use, often end up physically addicted to the opioids. And the patients that I saw in the hospital that were addicted to opioids, one I remember she had been admitted for a surgery on her back, and I was her nurse. And she was already taking 300 milligrams a day of OxyContin. And this woman was either fast asleep or awake and screaming pain. There was really no in between for her. There was no quality of life whatsoever. And there was this quandary with the physicians, because normally when a patient on opioids would come in for surgery, we would increase their dosage by 30% to accommodate for post-op pain, right? And with this patient, the doctors just felt like they could not possibly increase this patient's dosage by 90 milligrams a day without causing her harm. So that was one of the quandaries. The other case I distinctly remember is a patient who came in for a procedure. So I only was with this patient for half a day or so. But she came in and she had been on opioids for so long that one of the side effects is that it really slows down your gut motility. So your gut, which is normally moving constantly, her gut had stopped. And this woman had several tubes emerging from her abdomen that they had surgically placed to accommodate that lack of motility in her gut. Mm-hmm. And even so, this woman was in constant pain and constantly asking for more medications. And it just, once again, no quality of life. She was horribly addicted. And then I've seen some documentaries too. One in particular that stood out was Warning This Drug May Kill You, which talked about how opioid addiction is the leading gateway to heroin use and heroin deaths, right? Not to mention opioids themselves kill patients every 18 minutes in the US today. So they're very dangerous. Mm-hmm. So for those reasons, I was like, I need an alternative.
Oh, yeah. And yet that was very smart of you, because I was put on benzodiazepines and I got on to opiates and other things because of it. And I've even heard now that they're saying that the addiction to benzos can be even worse, that the withdrawals and the coming down can be worse than opiates. And so it's amazing the side effects. I was reading one of your studies, and you were saying that there are two major companies or medications that are approved for autism. And you were talking about the side effects that go with those. I mean, can you mention just some of those side effects?
Yes, and benzodiazepines are horrible too. And I've worked with patients who want to wean off of those medications because of the side effects. And it can be really difficult. And there are strategies that can help. Cannabis is one of those strategies, thankfully. What is approved for autism for FDA approved use are Risperdal and Abilify. And those medications have some horrible side effects. We also see a lot of off-label use of things like antidepressants, the SSRIs, benzodiazepines, antipsychotics, and even the anti-epileptic drugs, because all of these are neurosuppressive. So they're meant to help calm the autism behaviors and the mental health crises these kids experience. And the side effects include things like extrapyramidal symptoms, which is involuntary movements of the body. It's pretty torturous. It's almost like these people who have extrapyramidal symptoms, like their bodies are torturing them. Like they can be constantly licking their lips or have a, twitchy head or twitchy eyes, or, even difficulties with walking and functioning normally because of extrapyramidal symptoms. And the kicker is that you can have that response to a medication and stop the medication, but the extrapyramidal symptoms can be permanent. And then we have the other quality of life impairing things like male breast development, and you can have the opposite effects. You can actually make somebody more psychotic with these medications. Plus, there's life-threatening possible risk factors like suicidal ideation and Stevens-Johnson syndrome and neuroleptic malignant syndrome. So they really have some really prolific side effects that are worth considering. And when you compare those with cannabis, which has an unsurpassed safety profile, thousands of years of use in humans, there are considerations, and the major risk factor is avoidable because it's pharmaceutical interactions. So just by dose spacing, you can usually mitigate the risk factors that are inherent with cannabis use. So it's clearly a better option, in my opinion.
And now I'd like to keep going, but I'm going to actually have the next one flow into it. And that is psychosis and schizophrenia.
Yes.
This is one thing. A lot of people are talking about psychosis right now. And I'm noticing I'm getting a lot of questions from people, saying, why are people saying this is making people crazy? And I'm like, psychosis doesn't mean you're crazy. It's just actually a break from reality. And it's a temporary break from reality. Correct?
Psychosis is a breach from reality. It can be temporary. It can also be more chronic. We have both scenarios with schizophrenia. With schizophrenia, typically there's kind of a psychotic break that occurs that when there's this threshold of influences, and the person,
that's only if they are predisposed to schizophrenia, correct? Like it doesn't cause schizophrenia. However, if someone is already predisposed, that they can have, is that correct? Because that's how I understand it.
Well, and people can experience psychotic breaks with schizophrenia without cannabis too.
Of course.
So it can just spontaneously happen. It normally is during the teenage years when research says the brain cells will shed during the teenage years. So there may be something with the shedding and the part of the brain that sheds or doesn't shed that is implicated. We've seen studies that support that inflammation is part of schizophrenia. There's other research that supports that gut imbalances can contribute to schizophrenia. And there's a whole diet that targets psychosis and different mental health disorders called the gut and psychology syndrome diet. So there's a lot of different theories floating around. One of the theories is that if somebody is predisposed and they've isolated a gene called AKT1, that if that gene is mutated, that person is predisposed to schizophrenia. And if somebody has that mutation, THC is considered a contraindication for their use. So they're not supposed to use it because the theory is that it could trigger it could be the thing that triggers their schizophrenia. So,
But let's say if they didn't they thought they might have that. Let's say they use other cannabinoids. Can they avoid that possibility if they don't use THC and use, say, CBD or CBN or something else?
I mean, potentially could be avoided. I mean, we know that CBD is extraordinarily neuroprotective. So if it is something physiological like that brain shedding, it could be that the CBD would help to keep the brain in balance, so it wouldn't, that psychotic break wouldn't happen and they wouldn't fall into schizophrenia. So it's possible that it could be preventable. I've seen patients report reversal of schizophrenia just by changing their diet. So it's a very complex thing. It's not a one size fits all, and there's not one answer to this. But CBD is actually supported for use in schizophrenia as an antipsychotic. And I just recently posted an article you may have seen that talked about how the CB1 receptor in the brain is upregulated in schizophrenia, which typically we would see that as an indicator that the body is asking for interaction with that receptor, right? For example, there's research that when the brain is inflamed, the CB2 receptor, which is normally not found prolifically in the brain, it's usually other parts of the body, the CB2 receptor in the brain will upregulate when there's brain inflammation. And that's like the body asking for the CB2 receptor to be interacted with. And so we find things like CBG and beta-carophylline, which are CB2 agonists, meaning they activate that receptor. We see that being really beneficial for brain inflammation treatment. So with schizophrenia, here we have this mystery because the CB1 receptor upregulates. So the body is putting out more of these CB1 receptors asking for interaction, right? But at the same time, we know that THC, which is the CB1 agonist in the cannabis plant, so it activates the CB1 receptor, is contraindicated for schizophrenia. So but at the same time, we know that CBD, which is a CB1, it's a partial antagonist, meaning it partially blocks the CB1 receptor, that is actually beneficial for schizophrenia. So perhaps it's the body saying, we want CBD. We want these blocked. And I'm really, really interested to see. I haven't seen any research yet, but I'm hoping somebody will look at that research and say, hey, we should research THCV for schizophrenia because THCV blocks the CB1 receptor completely.
So which is why it's good for appetite suppression.
It is. It's good for appetite suppression and focus and diabetes. It has a few uses that have come out. But we also know that we need to be cautious with THCV. From research, it was a synthetic THCV that was researched in the UK, and they actually found that at a certain dosage, it was a pretty low dose, I think it was only like 10 milligrams, they actually had such an opposite effect to THC, which is very euphoric. So THCV is an anti-euphoric, that they actually had some patients that reported suicidal ideation with high doses of THCV. So once again, everything in balance, but it just, to me, knowing that CB1 agonism is not a good thing for schizophrenia, maybe CB1 antagonism would be the answer, and that would be the THCV. So
CBN, since it's the THC degraded, was that a CB1 antagonist, or does that play on CB2?
It's a CB1 agonist as well. It's weaker than the THC. THC is stronger than the CBN. So CBN is not as intoxicating. But then we're finding things like, is it the THCP that they just discovered in the last couple of months that seems to have even more affinity as a CB1 agonist, so even stronger effect on the CB1? So, I mean, we're still just learning so much. And that's part of what I love about this industry. With my hungry brain, I just love to deep dive into things and try to understand them. And there's so much opportunity for that in this industry. So.
I agree. And I've known so many people who are influential in my life who were affected by Alzheimer's. And I've seen the studies on CBN being preventing the degeneration of brain cells, which is the leading cause of Alzheimer's.
Wow.
And so that was one thing I really want to search or look into CBN a whole lot more for neurological issues like that, because I just love anything we can do to help prevent that, or at least help medicate those who are like that.
Right. Right. Yeah, and THC can be beneficial for Alzheimer's as well. For the calming the agitation and reducing anxiety. All of the cannabinoids can be really beneficial, I feel like. But THC is one of the best ones for really calming somebody when they're in an agitated state.
And that's the sad thing is, so many people I talk to, I would say 80% believe that they're surprised that you even suggest that there's anything more than pain suppression with cannabis. That's like what people go to. They're like, oh, it's just for pain management. People just use it for chronic pain. I'm like, that's something people will say they use it for. It's one of the easiest things to get it for in a legal, a medicinal state. And so that's where people's minds go to. But it's sad because there's so much more to it. And you were just talking about epilepsy. And I believe that I know there was somebody in England before William O'Shaughnessy, but William O'Shaughnessy in India in 1850, he talks about it being one of the best medications for convulsions of all types, I believe.
Yeah, cannabis is amazing for epilepsy. And so one of the stories, it's a patient outcome that have permission to share. A patient I worked with several years ago, 21 years old with autism and epilepsy. And she was using Epidiolex, which is an isolate CBD by GW Pharmaceuticals, and it's FDA approved for seizure treatments. So she was using the Epidiolex. She was on the highest dose and having some really unpleasant GI side effects, and she really was not feeling good on the medication. And she had a 24-hour EEG, which is the test that measures the brain activity and looks for seizures, right? And on that EEG, on the highest dose of Epidiolex, they were paying a bunch of money out of pocket for it. She was still having seizures every 5 minutes for the entire 24 hours. So then we switched her to a whole plant formulation of cannabis that was targeted for seizures. And by targeting, I mean, it's a formulation that has CBD, which has anti-seizure research supporting it, plus myrcene, which is known to help the cannabinoids cross the blood-brain barrier, so getting it into the brain is important with epilepsy. And linalool, which is also found in lavender and is also evidence-based and has research supporting it for anti-seizure properties. So it's a combination of those three things in this formulation that we put this patient on with all the other 500 compounds in the cannabis flower. And she repeated the EEG 6 months later on the whole plant CBD, 0 seizures in 24 hours.
Oh my gosh.
And she was having beneficial side effects of her formulation because she was also taking some THC for the autism. So she was enjoying the side effects of the medication. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just night and day. And so that's, it was prior to that I, working with patients, I began to learn that the different formulations and how they are extracted can really affect the patient's response and the health outcomes overall. And so that's when I really began, my nurses and I in 2018 came up with the flow criteria for optimal therapeutic use. And it's evidence-based. There's research supporting every parameter. It's flower-derived, lab-tested, organic, and whole plant spectrum, meaning it's either food-grade ethanol or, butane is a close second for extraction, but we don't see a lot of butane extractions in a tincture, which is my preferred. So, butane is usually the high concentrate, that people vape or smoke, and that's not optimal medicinal use, in my opinion. So,
I gotta say, flow criteria was what I was just about to go into. Mm-hmm. So we're definitely on the same wavelength here. That is something like my wife was talking to me. So my wife uses Megan's products, which are of our flow criteria as well. Yes. And she was looking at that because we're doing an unboxing video. My wife's not used to recording, so still working on that one. But she kept asking me about the flow criteria. She's like, only 10% of products meet it on the market, mm-hmm. At most. And so she wanted to know more about the flow criteria. And I was like, well, Janna right there, she's part of, she was part of it. She helped create it. And I was like, I'm going to ask her about flow criteria.
Yeah, definitely. So, and I have a website, it's cannabisnurseapproved.com, and mm-hmm. Trusted Canna Nurse is one of the product lines on there. And so what we do, having learned the importance of whole plant for medicinal use. And once again, I learned this by working with patients. And, if we go back to even further, so it kind of actually started when in 2014, I got some really profound benefits of cannabis therapy, using it only for pain, went on to reverse my autoimmune disease. I kind of did the deep dive into the research and became very passionate about this plant. So because I was disabled, I was not working, I began growing for myself, and then began growing for patients and began producing products, doing infusions and doing concentrates and edibles and tinctures and whatever the patient needed. And all of that was done in a whole plant way. I was using, 190 proof ethanol to extract. So I was getting that whole plant profile in my end products. And that's what I was used to working with, in the patients I had served in that population. And when, I started progressing and learning more, I became comfortable, got better myself, became comfortable as a nurse educating patients, and started contracting with different companies. And I contracted with the CO2 company. And needless to say, it did not go very well. I think I only saw a handful of patients. I was only with them a few months. And that was what made me realize, wow, these patients' responses are so unexpected. I don't understand. They're really struggling. They're not getting their outcomes. As they increase the dose, it falls off and stops working. What is going on?
Strip so much from from the plant. It takes 100% of the terpenes away, and then you have to reintroduce them, but you're never going to recover that full terpene profile. I could go into that for days.
I go as far as to call it a bastardization of the plant, because CO2 goes from 500 plus compounds in the flower that all have this beautiful synergy down to a dozen or maybe a couple of dozen compounds in the final product, versus ethanol extraction, especially done correctly with temperature control and different things. You can maintain most of that profile and still have many hundreds of compounds in the final product. Then we have, isolation, which is one compound. We have distillation, which is one compound with some other stuff thrown in. We have so many different versions of stripping down, and what we're losing is the antioxidants, the bioflavonoids, the essential fatty acids, and the chlorophyll, all of which have health benefits. And so we're really taking away the medicinal potential of cannabis when we strip it down like that.
Well, a lot of people even don't know is when you're doing the process of extracting, when you extract with ethanol, like you're saying, which I agree is the best way if you're going to extract. It keeps as much as you can when you're extracting.
Yes.
But when you're distilling, and that's what people just go, I'm just distilling that. And I'm going, well, there's one step that they don't ever really talk about, and that's terp stripping. And you have to terp strip your oil before you even distill it. And that is where it's taking all that away. And then not only when you distill it, it's heating it up and it's burning off anything left just to be able to activate your compounds and everything. But it's
tearing it apart.
Sad. I could see benefits to it in some ways, just recreational, if somebody really wants to enjoy themselves, but medicinally, and I could see it being fun, but I was just talking on to any microbiologist, and I said when I took a dab for the first time, I felt like I was on crack or cocaine. I didn't feel like I was on cannabis. It made me, it was my PTSD, but it just gave me so much at once, and I was ready to fight like I was on alcohol or something. It wasn't calming. I didn't understand why anybody would want to do it.
Yeah, it really is strange that and it's pure human ego to think we can take this perfection of nature that has evolved with us for more than 5,000 years now, we're finding, and tear it apart, remove a bunch of stuff and put it back together, and that somehow we've improved upon it, when really in reality it's more like Frankenstein oil, right? And I'm actually graduating on Sunday, on December 10th this year, with my certification in herbalism. And I have to tell you, it's been really interesting, because the view from the herbalism world, it is not controversial at all to say that the whole plant is far superior than any fractionated forms of it. It's a basic foundational wisdom that herbalists abide by, that whole plant is always better because nature knows best, right?
And here's the thing is I was one of the guys, I was an extractor. I was all about THC. I wanted to just get high. I wanted to get stoned. That's how I got into the growing business. I wanted to see if I could grow the highest THC, all that. I used to be there.
Yeah.
It wasn't until I started realizing, like, for my own medicinal sake, when I started I was like, one time I couldn't help it. I was like, just thinking, I was like, man, when I had Reggie, that stuff that was 7 to 14% THC at best, that stuff that had 8,000 seeds in it to your one bud, that stuff, it took a lot, but I remember enjoying it more. It made me feel better. And this new stuff, it was a lot more powerful. Like, I remember getting into belladonna, White Widow, all that stuff, and it was enjoyable. But man, it was so much different, and the more powerful it went. I remember everyone being crazy that we got 20% THC cannabis.
Oh,
then it went to high 20s, then low 30s, now 40s. So how high can we go? And I mean, it's still exciting to see it, but I just want people to know that medicinally, that is not helping you. You're taking away so much from that plant to create that 40%. What's the other 60% of that plant?
Exactly, because you can only have 100%. So if as you're increasing the THC, you're losing other things. You're decreasing other compounds in the plant. And it is really anti-intuitive. And a very good friend of mine is a cannabis geneticist. He's been doing this since the 80s or something. He was in Netherlands for like 20 years, being a geneticist with cannabis in the Netherlands. So he knows his stuff. His catalog is amazing. He has more than 1,200 seed strains, more than 80 that are landrace strains. I mean, amazing. Awesome. And in his opinion is that if we continue tampering with the cannabis genetics the way we're doing it, I mean, he's a purist. He doesn't even like feminized seeds. He feels like we're, making trans cannabis plants or something, and that we're breaking the genome of the cannabis plant. He feels we're at risk of that.
Are hermaphroditic plants, are they natural in nature, right? Mm-hmm. Or is that something that we've created? And for anyone wondering, what I'm saying is it's a plant that's actually both male and female. It will produce pollen sacs and cannabis flower at the same time.
Yeah, so becoming a hermaphrodite plant does happen naturally. I've had it happen in my grow room before. It seems to happen when a plant is really stressed out. It'll produce seeds even if it's not pollinated. So it's kind of like a death cry of a plant, I feel like. Interestingly, some of my favorite flower that a friend gave me this year is not trimmed, so it's really bushy and it's full of seeds. And I love it because, a lot of the trim, when they remove it, and I feel like they overgroom it for the dispensaries, you lose a lot of the trims. You lose a lot of the potency that way.
As a trimmer myself, as a grower, previous grower, trimmer, you want it to look really pretty, and you're so much. I mean, the extractions I've done with my shake should not have been as strong as they were, just because I removed so much. Yep.
And the seeds, I mean, you can grow again. So I love seedy, bushy flower.
I agree.
My stuff.
I love I've noticed that the hermaphroditic plants, they also seem to clone easier or better. I don't know why. I have no idea why. But when you're growing, do you care to be as organic in your growing as possible, or are you okay with whatever you buy as nutrients?
No, I'm absolutely organic. Use living soil is the best way to do that, and the soil naturally produces the nutrients that the plant needs through the natural process.
So you don't give any outside nutrients?
Not anymore. I used to. I mean, I started off, as we know better, we do better, right? My first turn growing, the person who taught me and mentored me was used to general hydroponics. So that's what we used. even though I was growing in soil. It's like, what was I doing?
Oh,
But
I've got it.
Yeah, you progress. So
I've got something for you to try. It's going to be outside nutrients, yet still 100% organic.
nice.
This is a trick I've done. It was the best cannabis I've ever grown, and it came from the worst cannabis I've ever smoked.
Wow.
And what I did was I just researched and found that rabbit manure has almost a perfect nutrient profile for tomatoes, is what it said. And I was like, oh, I know what tomatoes are very much like. And so I was like, well, I'm going to try that. But they said that it's low in calcium and magnesium. So I was like,
Okay.
I know eggshells are high in calcium and magnesium. So
there you go.
what I would do is it's a cold manure. You can put it right on your plants. It won't harm them whatsoever. Nice. And I just use it as a topsoil for my soil and just leave it there all year round. And I just add a little bit at a time. Your rabbits will pee on their poop piles, so that you're getting a lot of nitrogen. And you just take a nice big scoop, put it into a bucket with water, leave it for 7 days covered in a dark space, add some eggshells, and then that's rabbit tea, and you can shoot it. And the next day they'll look different because it's a immediate injection of nutrients. But that's how I did mine. Best I've ever done. 100% clone rate. Sorry, I get really nerdy.
Well, it's nice it's not too hot, because the first time I tried a fermented tea, I'm trying to remember what kind of, I think it was llama manure. A friend of mine shared some that he was making. I burned the crap out of my plant.
That's a lot of people don't realize you have to. That's what the oh man, what is that called? You got to decompose it for
you got to ferment
for 9 to 12 months. Yes. But yeah, rabbit poop, and it's not even that stinky, and it sounds odd, but they're like little raisinets. It's like it's not even that gross. I'd never touched it with my hand, but a lot of people will. But very nice to work with. And then you start moving around the soil, and you just see all the microbes growing in it, and it will produce a lot of fungi, which is really good for synergy with your plants. Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. And so I'm raising chickens now, but chicken manure is way too hot.
Oh yeah, 12 months at least.
Let it sit a while and put it in compost.
It's really good though. Once it's done, it's really good.
Yeah, once it cools off, it's good. But I came up with a soil mix where I could pretty much get my plants all the way through the vegetative state just watering.
That's awesome.
It was started with the Fox Farms Ocean Forest mix, and I added half a dozen ingredients. I added perlite. I added, high nitrogen. I'm trying to remember what it was. I've got the list somewhere, and it's been published in a book, a couple of books, I think. But it's that's the way to go, is to just really make sure the nutrients are in the soil and they're in there naturally. Mycorrhizals, minerals are super important.
Share that book with me.
Nitrogen in veg. So I'd put in like worm castings, all kinds of stuff. But once they get into flower, their needs tend to vary by the strain. And so then you want a little bit more flexibility. So that's when I was doing more of the individualized topical and feeding treatments for the plants. And I had some mishaps. We all do. We all get infestations, and we learn through doing it.
Spider mites.
I did have some hermaphrodite plants. I accidentally had a male that snuck in my female flower room and pollinated everything. So I still have some of the seeds from that. Made some great strains, by the way. But in order to make a feminized plant and feminized seeds, you have to take a female plant and spray it with a chemical called sodium thiosulfate, which is a genetic mutagen. And it actually, once again, it's breaking the genome of the plant. It's turning the plant from female to male. And then that plant will put out pollen sacs like a male would. And the pollen inside those sacs will produce only female seeds when you put them on another female plant. So that's the way that they make feminized seeds. So some people are really against that. They're for the natural seed, and pulling the males out if they pop. And then there's other things people are doing just to try to tamper with the genetics to make higher THC, like you were talking about before. So there's all kinds of ways that we're tampering with the cannabis genome.
For me, I want it all. I want everyone to be able to do it, but I want them all to do it. I don't want anyone to say you can't do it. I want people to be like, okay, I want to do 100% organic, or you know what? I want to try to have the high THC. You want to try that? I'm sure, even though we act like how ridiculous it is, I'm sure that there's a pain out there that could really benefit from a really high THC. I don't think that everyone should be doing it, but it's very hard to see anything going on with cannabis and call it not a good thing.
Yeah.
But there are some.
There's just some anti-intuitive things happening, and it seems to all be, sales and profit driven. It's not. And it is. It's not with the patient and medical use in mind. Usually, it's usually going a different direction. And as a medical professional, I'm a retired nurse, but still, I'm a medical professional. That doesn't appeal to me as much. Although I have to say, after my husband's surgery, I was just telling you about, he had broke his leg in February, 3 places, had major surgery, off his feet for 3 months. Having White Widow rosin in a vape pen was the only option for him for his breakthrough pain, because he couldn't have a tincture with his pharmaceuticals, his post-op pharmaceuticals. He couldn't add tincture to that because of the interactions. So it was that vape rosin White Widow pen that got him off of the opioids, and then he could return back to the tinctures. So, I mean, it does have use. There is a good use for it.
Yeah, I got out off of benzodiazepines and opiates with cannabis on my own, so it took me about 3 or 4 years, to be honest, on and off, just trying to. It's very expensive to get. That's another thing. That's another thing that I try to really stress to people, that if you're low on money, it really benefits you to find out what works for you the best, because you're not going to be wasting your money on strains or cannabis that's not going to do it for you. I mean, we all have those batches or those strains that we get that never quite get us there, so we're smoking or using just a little bit more than we should. And other times we get it and it's perfect. And, it's just 2 or 3 hits. And you're like, oh, man, I'm exactly where I want to be. And it will last, 12 days longer than that one you got before. And so that's where I stress to people, it will really help you in your wallet, because that's something I've always struggled with in my past, because I didn't have a whole lot of money. And so I stress to people, it will really help you in that regard, if anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. And, one of the challenges being a cannabis patient, if you're relying on a dispensary for your products, especially, is that once you find what you like, is it going to be available next time? Or is it going to be sold out? And then you're trying to find something else. And so, as a nurse, I consulted with patients and educated and provided guidance with the goal of helping them optimize their medical cannabis therapy outcomes. Part of that was trying to guide them to cannabis formulations that would be a good match for their specific situation, because not all strains are good for every use. I learned that early on too, and White Widow was my pain for strain, but there were lots of strains that I grew, smelled incredible, and I was so excited about them, but they were no good for pain. So I learned that early on, but that's part of why I began working with suppliers and helping them to produce targeted use formulations. And the Trusted Canna Nurse product you mentioned earlier is I helped with some of her formulations to target them for a designated use. And Unity Formulas is another production company that I have worked with, and they have a whole line of products that are targeted use. And this is one of my favorites. It's called Elevate. I have ADHD pretty bad. So this is my go-to when I'm feeling brain fogged and I can't find my words, or, as a professor, if I have a pile of papers to grade and I'm just not feeling it, this is what I go to. And it's a CBD CBG combo. It also has terpenes in it that are known to help with focus, things like pinene. And we have several patients that have given us testimonies that they have been able to wean off Ritalin and ADHD with this formulation. Awesome. We also have a bunch of formulations that are good for autism, for obvious reasons, for pain, for immune support, for cancer. And it's the ingredients are blended in a way that's really intentional. And the nice thing is, once a patient finds what works for them, they can get the supply consistently.
And that's amazing.
Yeah,
I really want to point that out. As someone who's been using cannabis for 15 years, people, please listen to her. She's completely right about dispensaries, because I go there all the time and I'm always like, do you have this strain? No, we don't have that anymore. And maybe 6 months later they'll have it again. It kills me. These grows really need to have at least keep 3 plants of the same one. If you want to keep evolving, at least keep a little section so those people who are using it medicinally can still find it. It kills me. Everyone is so focused on crossbreeding that they don't keep the original breeds anymore.
Right.
White Widow, I've seen that in years.
I still have some. I saw some
I would have loved.
I grew it.
I had this one they called it Banana OG Kush, and it smelled and tasted just like banana. And it was the best strain I've ever had in my life, and I've never been able to find it again.
Yeah. That's the thing with strains. And so, another thing that Unity Formulas offers is free nurse guidance. So anybody can go and schedule a call with a nurse and help them determine which formulation on the line might be the best fit. And the producer, Jarek, will bend over backwards to help people. He and I have worked together for 6-7 years. He could basically finish my sentences at this point. And he will custom blend for people who can't find a fit on the product line that's, on the menu. So it's a really nice service. We have an affiliate ship as well. If anybody's interested, it's free to sign up, and it comes with training and mentorship with me to learn about the products. And I will, I'll furnish you a 20% off coupon too that you're welcome to give your viewers if they want to check out unityformulas.com. So it's a pretty cool.
Oh, please.
Yeah.
I'll definitely do that. I want everyone to get. Listen to this, guys. I want you guys to get as much money off on any products as possible, because I want people to be able to save money.
And the nice thing about Unity too is they're products with purpose, and I don't make sales commissions from them. As a nurse, I've never felt right about benefiting from products I recommend. And so, what I would normally be paid is donated to nonprofit Autism Safe Haven, 501c3, which is committed to cannabis inclusive autism care resources. And so they're really products with purpose as well. And it's really, they're supporting a higher need in this community. So
I actually just thought I would like you to send me any foundations that you support or that you are a part of. And I'd like to do a fundraiser for them too, because that's something I've actually been wanting to do. And I'm so stinking busy all the time. I'll have an idea, I'll write it down, and then I'll find the idea about a year later. I'm like, dagnabbit, I forgot about that. So I'm trying to bring on more people so they can help me. I really need an assistant, because I have memory loss with my TBI and my PTSD and all that. I try my best, but you could ask my wife. I get tablets and all such sorts of things to write down what I need to remember, but I just don't remember to grab the tablet that I wrote all the stuff down on.
I understand. You should try some of the Elevate blend. It might help. It's almost like when I take the Elevate blend in the morning, and the CBG, it's almost like somebody turns up the dimmer in my brain. I don't know how else to explain it. It's amazing that way.
Anything you suggest, I'm going to try. And I'm going to do it on a video so that people can see. I would love people to see, like, firsthand, like how it works and whatnot. If you don't mind, I would love to do that.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, I'll connect you with Jarek. He's the producer, and we'll get you some product, and you can try that. It's pretty amazing. It really is. It's not intoxicating. It's so great for daytime use.
That's another thing I'm passionate about now, because my wife now has CEHS. I'm pretty sure we're going to do a video with Megan Bang, trusted Canna nurse, about it. But I really like the non-intoxicating, because she's really benefiting it with her anxiety without having to get high. But go ahead, please.
Yeah, and I think she's got the CBGA combo. I think she uses for tolerance breaks. It's they're doing a whole group thing with that, so it's great.
Yeah, and that looks like a lot of promising data coming out of that. She keeps sharing the positiveness of it, and it's really awesome to see. She's an amazing person. She makes me feel like the laziest person in the world. So
Yeah, Megan and I connected. It's been just over a year ago. I've been mentoring her and connected her with Unity formulas. And, she and I both have these quick brains. And so we can just rapid fire. It's so much fun.
Oh, you guys make me feel, obviously, I see her. She's got 15 videos out. She's taken her kids to the soccer game. She's done 3 podcasts. And I'm sitting there going, I'm still editing one.
Go. And she's awesome. Girl on fire.
I agree. And you are too. I mean, she's the one who suggested you to me, and she has, I can't say your name and her not go off about how great you are. So she talks about you nonstop. And I understand now. I mean, I enjoy Ruth Fisher, and I enjoyed Dr. Ruth Fisher and Dr. Bonnie Goldstein. They were amazing. But I just noticed when I was editing, I was like, I could notice Janna and I were really riffing really well. We were like everything I was saying, you were like, I was like, I like that about her.
I just posted a meme recently, and it said something about I need to learn to use my inside voice with my facial expressions. I'm like, yeah, that's me. I'm just.
Not everybody needs a poker face.
Jazz hands.
That's a doctor's job, not a nurse's job. Nurses need to humanize it, a little bit,
Yeah, definitely.
No, Dr. Goldstein, actually, that brings me into the next one. Just really quick, I wanted to cover, because you said you use Cannabis is Medicine, which is a book that was written by Dr. Bonnie Goldstein. Please check it out. I still have yet to read it, but I'm ordering it, and I'm going to be reading it.
Yes, this is the book for my new college course that launches January of 2024 at John Patrick University. If you're interested in looking into their offerings, it's jpu.edu, and their cannabinoid science degrees are under the integrative and functional medicine degree programs. So this book is actually going for the course that I'll start teaching in January for their nutrition degree students on foundations of medical cannabinoid science. So it should be really interesting. It's been fun. It's been a journey.
And really quick, I'll have those links. I'll get them from Janna, and you can see them in the description of this video. But go ahead. Why do you use this book for your classes?
It's just such a great explanation of the endocannabinoid system and the multiple uses. The fact that it's written by a physician that has clinical knowledge and has actually seen this plant in action, I think is so important. We have a lot of people teaching the theory, but not a lot of people teaching the clinical aspects of cannabis approaches. And we need medical professionals that are competent to guide patients and understand the considerations and understand the risk factors and understand how to assess and, not just listening to the research, but also looking at patient outcomes, which I consider strong evidence to what might be the best approach as well. So
I would love to be able to say the endocannabinoid system and not have 5 of them look at me like I'm crazy.
I know. The fact
that would be nice.
The fact that we have this system in our body. So in nursing school, I learned about 11 systems. I didn't learn about the endocannabinoid system, even though we discovered it in the early 90s.
Yep.
And it's still today, I think it's like 20% of medical schools, and it's mostly like naturopathic or an osteopath, alternative medicine schools are teaching cannabinoid science now. But the mainstream schools mostly are not. And so this really explains why a patient may go to a physician and say, hey, I want to try cannabis. And their response is, uh-oh, wait a minute, go ahead if you want, but I don't want to know about it. And I can't talk to you about it. And I'm not putting it in your record. There's a reason for that response. It's been so stigmatized. And, not to mention that they hear it's good for everything. And because they don't have the endocannabinoid knowledge, they don't understand that cannabis is filling a known deficiency linked with every chronic illness, endocannabinoid deficiency. And they don't understand that when we have ample cannabinoids, whether from internal production or from the plant, that it promotes optimal health balance, or homeostasis is the big fancy word for it. And that actually addresses the underlying contributors to every disease is imbalances. So when you look at it from that bigger paradigm, it's very clear how cannabis is good for almost everything. I'm not saying it's a fix-all. Sometimes we want other therapies. And, in my health in particular, it was the cannabis and the nutrigenomics, which is genetically individualized supplementation and dietary. and, many other things, meditation, transcendental meditation. My healing happened on so many levels. And while I feel cannabis was one of the big pieces of my recovery, and, still to this day continues managing my pain with, and my condition is so complex. I tell people it took me 9 years to finally get a diagnosis that explained everything that had happened. And that was in 2021. And so, to this day, my main symptom today is that I have randomly dislocating joints. So I'll wake up out of bed and my shoulder's out of the socket or my hip is out. So very painful, and not a lot I can do about it otherwise, but physical therapy. I'm looking into stem cell treatments, and prolotherapy is an option where they inject your joints with acid to scar them and make them less loose, not very healing. So it's just been such a wonderful answer. And I truly believe that if it wasn't for cannabis, I probably wouldn't still be here. There were so many traumas, and my system was so out of balance. So many impacts. My pancreas was deficient. I was in renal failure, 20 pounds lighter than I am today. I'm not, and I'm probably a healthy weight now.
What toll would the other medications have taken on your body as well?
Yeah, that's exactly why I think I would not still be here if it hadn't been for cannabis, because my lupus physician, he already had me on prednisone and plaquenil. My next step was methotrexate, which has a side effect of cancer. And even though I was autoimmune, so part of my immune system was overreactive and attacking my own cells, that's autoimmune. Another part of my immune system, that specifically the natural killer cell levels, which your natural killers are the first response to cancer. They're the ones that get rid of the cancer cells. Those were extraordinarily deficient, to the tune of less than 10% of the lowest lab normal. And they wanted to put me on methotrexate that has a side effect of cancer. And I'm like, this is a 1+1 equation. What are you thinking? So, cannabis came on board, and within 6 months, my lupus lab seroconverted, and I was no longer positive for lupus. I was negative.
Explain to people why that's so amazing, because isn't it like most people, they just live with lupus until they die?
Yep. It's considered degenerative. It's supposed to continue getting worse until it kills you. It's not supposed to ever seroconvert. You're not ever supposed to overcome it. You can manage it very well with some natural things like diet and supplementation. The medications are pretty awful. Prednisone, horrible side effects. It actually, yeah.
So, sorry to interrupt.
No.
So are you cured or are you managed?
I am negative for lupus, and I have been since 2013.
And so can you say cured, or are you not allowed to say that?
I don't know if that's the word. I don't know, because my condition
I have no idea. I'm just wondering.
Well, my Ehlers-Danlos syndrome is definitely not cured. And one of the side effects of having Ehlers-Danlos, it's a genetic collagen disruption. That's why my joints are loose, is because the ligaments don't have enough collagen. So they stretch like they shouldn't. A side effect and one known impact of having the Ehlers-Danlos genetics is that you can get autoimmune diseases. So in my case, the autoimmune was a side effect of the Ehlers-Danlos, which I still have. So that's why I hesitate to say I'm cured, because I'm not really cured.
I see.
I've managed to target these different areas of imbalance within my body that are a side effect of these faulty genetics, and mitigate most of the impact. The reason I didn't get diagnosed Ehlers-Danlos until 2021 is partially because I had addressed many of the major things that were happening: the chronic pain, the brain fog. I used to not be able to hold a conversation. I was bedbound for months. I was totally and permanently disabled. I couldn't write a paper. And now I'm writing for the American Journal of Endocannabinoid Medicine as an author. So I've come a long way, but I prioritized, and the pain was sort of the last priority. Like, I can deal with pain. If that's it, I can deal with the pain. But there were all these other things, the pancreas shutting down, regaining the weight, getting strong again. And the physical therapy of growing was part of that recovery. So there were just all these steps that I went through. And really, I didn't start getting joint dislocations like while I slept until the last couple of years as I'm entering perimenopause. That's becoming more prolific. And that's when I finally went to the doctor and said, hey, maybe we should try to figure this out. And it was a good diagnosis to have, simply because it's actually the main reason I retired my nursing license, is because I will never work in a hospital again. I'm at really high risk of immune and physical injury both. So it's not a good fit for me anymore.
No, it's a lot of people think it's the safest place to be. It's a hospital, the cleanest place. I'm like, no, it's a cesspool in a hospital. It's like one of the most dangerous places to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, they try to keep it sanitized, but my goodness.
Yeah. Yeah. And we don't have a lot of research on cannabis for Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, but I've connected with several people with this same diagnosis who are using cannabis and have really prolific outcomes. One example is someone that went from bedbound to literally traveling the world now using cannabis. So, and the underlying dysfunction in Ehlers-Danlos syndrome is different things that kind of, it's like the interstitial tissues between the cells and everything else. And it really guides the cellular communication and keeping that balanced. It guides all these other things. And we don't have research yet on the endocannabinoid system crossover with the extracellular matrix. So this is my new deep dive. You should see the books on my desk right now. I've got a whole pile of them, and like 3 of them are on this topic, and I'm trying to put it together. So, it brings about these new deep dives that are so fascinating. I just want to see you in a month, and I'll have more info.
I get bad into it. Man, so a lot of viewers might notice I used to put out a video at least once a week. I used to put out so much content. I had to stop. I had to slow down. My wife sat me down. She's like, you're not really getting much out of this. You're not here for the family. You're not helping out. You're not doing this. She was right. I would lock in on something and I'd spend 8 hours and not even realize it, just trying to learn. And there were the kids just wanting to spend time with me. And that's why I had to slow it down. I had to take some time off. And now I just put out a video every once in a while, trying to get a lot of these up and then get these podcasts out. But I really have to manage my time better, because I am the same way. I love learning and doing deep dives. And I you can attest, I contacted all 3 of you guys. It's like, send me stuff. I want to learn. I love to learn. Yes. Make sure I'm not saying stupid things on here, because I have in the past.
Well, we all have. As we know better, we do better. I tell people, like, the first time my husband made cannabis medicine for me in 2013, he made RSO using acetone.
Oh.
Today I say, do not do that. Do not.
No.
In there, it will make you very, very sick. And I'm thankful he was conscientious about it. And it actually made me better. But, as we learn better, we do better. That's really the take home. So, and there's always more to learn. Nobody ever knows everything. And we won't for a long time in this industry. We still have so much to learn. So, yeah.
And I just really quick to give a quick tip, since you were talking about that. A lot of people ask me, can I use isopropyl alcohol instead of ethanol? Don't. It's the water content. There's a reason it's only 70% alcohol. That's why we use ethanol. I want to give tips, but I can get in trouble for using tips, but there are different grain alcohols that you can get on the market that are just as good as ethanol. But ethanol is 99%. The closest one you can get in a liquor store is 95. So it's not much difference, but it is a difference.
Yeah. And I progressed, once I learned the importance of food grade solvents with your cannabis, especially if you're homemaking, and you're not lab testing, you want it to be food grade. So if there's residuals, it's not going to harm you. Well, then I switched to using Everclear. And I had a friend that worked at a lab, and I sent her some of my oil, and she had it tested. And even though I had grown it all organically, knew everything that had gone into it, there were some residual toxins that they couldn't even identify. And so I kind of pieced that apart and disseminated it and came up with that it must be remnants from the GMO corn they used to make the Everclear. even though distillation is supposed to get rid of everything, something survived. So at that point, I switched to using 190 proof organic sugarcane alcohol, which I get at the Ashland Organic Alcohol Company locally here.
Sugarcane
So that's a much
alcohol,
better fit. That with my green oil machine, and I can make full extract cannabis oil in about an hour. So it's a pretty quick and simplistic process. And the machine actually redistills the alcohol and spares it for next use and strengthens it a little bit, of course, through that process.
And that's awesome. But it is important to note, if anybody's going to do that, just my science mind working, you should only do that about 4 times. It will start to lose its alcohol consistency after so many times. At least that's what I learned in our lab, because we did the same thing with rotovaps. We would condense but what it's doing is it's creating a vapor, and then it recondenses it with a chiller, and so it creates a vapor, creates it back into a liquid, and then recaptures it. And that it's almost perfect the second time. The third time, the fourth time, it's going to be like 70%.
Well, good to know. I figured it was just getting stronger every time. And
No,
it's very safe. It's meant for home use. It's fully enclosed. There's, not vapor.
Now, I could be wrong here. This is just what I've learned from the scientists that I worked with.
Well, we'll have to test it. We'll try it. We'll do an experiment. How's that?
Yeah, that's great to do, because I mean, like I've told everybody, research. Look at sometimes I'll say something incorrectly, but I always put the links to what I say, the resources to what I usually on my videos. So you can click on it and look, and then you can tell me if I'm wrong, stupid. Lots of people love to do that in the comments. Go for it. I actually do like to know when I'm wrong, so I don't say idiotic things, and I'll change it, and I'll research it, make sure it's not wrong, and then I'll do a correction.
Well, and then in some areas, it's just okay to disagree. We don't all. I don't think.
No.
Anybody.
There's a lot of people who disagree with that statement.
Yeah. Very few, if any, who I agree with 100% across the board. We all have our beliefs based on our own experiences, and unless we have lived in someone else's shoes, it's going to be difficult to understand their paradigm. So I give a lot of grace, but being a very visible person as you are too, we definitely get trolled a lot. There's got to be that aspect of, okay, yeah, they're just a troll, I'm not going to bother with them. But if somebody brings up a valid point and they have the evidence, absolutely, I'll listen to it and change my own paradigm. So yeah.
And I don't suggest, if you are going to start creating videos or doing this stuff, don't read comments.
Yeah.
It's not good for your psyche. But I don't respond anymore. I used to respond, and I actually got a lot more subscribers when I responded, but it's poisonous to your mind, and you just start fixating on it. That's one thing was anymore. So
yeah, I just don't even respond. I'm working with this group that's focused on spiritual entrepreneurship, and they talk about how as you level up in your career and you level up in your visibility, the people that challenge you are also going to level up. You're going to get more pushback. You're going to get more criticism. You're going to get more people questioning and, maybe even trolling you. And this happened to me just recently. It's only been maybe a couple of months ago that I accepted the contract with the American Journal of Endocannabinoid Medicine to write for them and put out my first article. It expanded my audience pretty substantially because they have 1.5 million subscribers, and it's very medically focused. It's mostly physicians, almost all medical professionals in their subscriber group. And I put out my first article. Sure enough, got a major troll coming after me. And it was somebody, I'm not going to mention her name, but it was somebody that is is considered a leader in the cannabis nursing industry. She's the head of a big organization. She called me out, basically said that I was spewing misinformation when I had proof of everything I had written. But she did that. She publicly attacked me and then blocked me. So it was one of these things where it's like I couldn't even respond. I couldn't defend myself. I was very frustrated at first. Just, wow, okay, why is this happening? And called and vented to a friend, got a good night's sleep. And the next day kind of felt into it and thought, wow, that person is really struggling.
Yep.
People
that's what it is.
Others this way. And I found compassion and just let it go. Never responded. And it wasn't somebody I knew, which I think made it easier. Like if it's a friend or a family member, it's a little harder to maintain that zen around it. But it's like, well, what's the consequence? A
lot of the time too is they'll go against what they've said in the past, and they feel threatened by what you're saying, and they just attack you. And the fact that she blocked you right away, that's a telltale sign that she lost already. Yeah. She attacked you. That's already not cordial.
Yeah.
If somebody has a problem with me, contact me. Let me know. Don't just put it right out there. If I'm a jerk, I'll say that. If I'm a jerk, and when you privately message me, go to town. Let people know. Put it out there. But contact me first. Be like, hey, what's going on here? Do you have any evidence? Here you go. Yeah. Then if you have a problem, do it.
Yeah. It's, and people are entitled to their opinions. I get that. In retrospect, it was really not consequential at all. And if anything, it kind of falls under the category of there's no such thing as bad publicity.
Yep.
Okay.
It's sure. Hard. It's hard to realize that in a moment, though. It really is. Your pride gets hurt. You're just like, why would somebody do this to me? I thought people liked me.
Yeah. It's one of those things where it's like we have to agree to disagree, I guess. So whatever. But yeah,
one thing is terpenes in the cannabis community. A lot of people don't want to admit that terpenes are a viable anything. They really don't. That's just for taste. That's all it is.
Look at the research.
I know. I'm like the Big Book of Terpenes, I believe is what it's called, right?
Yes, I have that actually. The Big Book of Terps.
Yeah, early 2000s.
Show that one too. You're going to have me pulling everything off my bookshelf today.
That's another book I need to purchase.
Written by Russ Hudson.
And so does it have a date on it?
April of 2022 is when he signed it for me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it's about a year and a half old. But, still. And before that, I used the book Essential Oil Safety because the terpenes are the building blocks of the essential oils. There you go.
Yeah. So these are my favorite posters that I get. They're from CannabisEducationPosters.com. If anybody's interested, you can get 20% off. She actually just bumped my discount code up. She's been my hardcore supporter since the beginning, but this is also, I'll have it when we do it for full screen, but this is the endocannabinoid system. And like she was saying earlier, there's so much more to it that people don't understand. She depicts all the CB1, CB2, and then also GPR 119, GPR 55, GPR 18, and TRY PV1. Never even heard of those.
Oh, they're all fascinating.
Oh my gosh. And she has it just like Da Vinci's the guy in the circle. She did it just like that to show all the receptors. It's amazing and beautiful. But she's a great artist. Anyway, I'm kind of digressing there, but terps.
Got those posters; those are pretty cool. Yeah, it's and we're still learning new pathways all the time that cannabis interacts with. We don't have a full picture yet. CB1 receptors are mostly in the central nervous system, so the brain and the spinal cord. CB2 are mostly in the gut, the immune system, and peripheral tissues. The GP proteins are kind of all over. One that's noteworthy is the GPR55 you mentioned. That is a major pathway that CBD blocks. that cancer cells actually rely on that pathway to grow and spread. So when we block it, it's a really powerful intervention for cancer. Heard you mention the TRPV, that's a pain pathway. And cannabis can interact with that pathway in a way that no pharmaceuticals can touch. And in fact, the pharmaceutical industry has tried to mitigate and modulate that pathway for pain. And their outcomes included patients that lost their sensation completely and ended up like burning themselves and not knowing it. So really, we haven't figured out how this plant so wisely modulates this pathway in a way that's safe and effective. With pharmaceuticals, we can't even touch it. So pretty interesting.
It is. It's very, very interesting. Especially with the all the issues that we find that come out of the 20th century. It's amazing that you don't really hear, like you hear about them here and there before that, but there's nothing widespread. It's like something happened in the 30s. I don't know what that could be, but something happened.
It happened earlier than the 30s. There was, a real shift away from
I agree.
Traditional wisdom and plant medicine. And it was the spawn of the pharmaceutical industry. And pharma came in and wrote all the curricula for medical schools and gave all the schools big grants to use their curricula and push their form of medicine. So that's really when they were allowed to come in and take over, because we needed something to fill in for the lack of cannabis that had been our medicine forever, right?
And I think that they did two things. I think that they hijacked the League of Nations, and I think that they hijacked the temperance movement, because the temperance movement was started for alcohol, and then right as soon as opiates come along, you just start seeing states for the temperance movement banning cannabis for no reason.
Yeah.
And then the League of Nations in 1925 at the Second Geneva Convention got together and said they wanted to end recreational use of cannabis in 30 years. And it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. There were a lot of incentives behind it. It wasn't just medicine either. It was oil and gas and paper and textiles and, all building materials. There were all kinds of things we were using cannabis for. Other industries were hoping to come in and monopolize. Paper was another big one. And so it was put in a place where it was not accessible to people for profit reasons. And even today, I feel like the Schedule I placement of cannabis remains because of the same profit, mostly pharmaceutical interests that are fighting it, and they own Congress. Pharmaceutical contributions to our Congress campaign contributions are more than double that of the next leading industry, which is oil and gas. And pharmaceuticals do not want cannabis access. Not unless they can patent it and bastardize it and isolate it and make all the money off it.
Agreed. So, what do you think about what is it that they just did? Switch it to Schedule III. What are your thoughts on that? Because I do not see that as a win, to be honest.
No, I think we need to really separate the plant and all of its whole plant derivatives from the altered forms. And I think the altered forms, the isolates, the distillates, the CO2s, anything where we've changed the profile of the cannabis plant that has this unsurpassed safety profile for thousands of years. It doesn't belong on a schedule. It doesn't. It doesn't meet any of the criteria. It's not addictive physically, less than caffeine and sugar. It's not potentially harmful. It has this unsurpassed safety profile, and it has really valid medical uses, and our own government holds patents for cannabis specific to its medicinal uses. So it's pure hypocrisy that it's Schedule I. Schedule III, I think, is appropriate for the altered versions because they do not work the same way as the whole plant, and they do not boast the same unsurpassed safety profile. And this is really clear when we look at the meloxicam case study that happened in 2020 of a patient who was on meloxicam. It's an NSAID anti-inflammatory drug for pain. And she was taking a CBD formulation and switched to a different one. And the new CBD formulation was an isolate liposomal CBD that boasted enhanced bioavailability. So it's going to have increased absorption in your system, right? And unfortunately, meloxicam uses the same metabolic pathway is CBD. It's the CYP450 pathway. And so when she combined it with the liposomal CBD, the theory, when you retrospectively disseminate this case study, is that the enhanced bioavailability translated to enhanced interaction with the pharmaceutical. And this woman died 3 days later of a known side effect of meloxicam, Stevens-Johnson syndrome, which you can think of it as like flesh-eating bacteria. It is not a pleasant death at all. And yes, it was a perfect storm scenario. Lots of pearls we can pull from it. Like, she was elderly. She probably had decreased clearance of the meloxicam. She'd been on it a really long time. But then when you combined it with that enhanced bioavailability CBD, it was like, boom, there we go. So this is why I say that anything that's been altered and doesn't fall into our historical knowledge of this plant with an unsurpassed safety profile should be regulated. Let them tax the heck out of that. Let's make the plant and access to the plant a basic human right again. That's
so what you're saying is, let's make it a plant the way it's supposed to be. I agree. I absolutely agree.
Yep. As an herbalist, let's grandfather it in with all of the rest of the safe and effective herbs that are available over the counter that anybody can grow and anybody can do whatever the heck they want to with it. That's what I think we need. We need to separate them.
And you're right. In the industrial side, there's so much you can do. And a lot of people will say that it's just hemp stalks that you can use industrially. I'm like, they're better, but you can use what they call marijuana stalks for industrial purposes as well. I've even heard people say that they're superior to hemp, but I don't know if that's true. I've just heard some people say that. Now,
I don't know.
There's so many things that you can do with that. You can create hempcrete, you can create hemp paper. There's so many things you can do with just the industrial side of cannabis that you can do on your own for your own self-sustainability. And I think that's another reason they really don't like it, because Hearst, now a lot of people know the HBO show Deadwood, but there's a George Hearst in that series that a lot of people know. He's like the cutthroat guy. He controls everything, becomes a senator. It's his son, Randolph Hearst. He was given a newspaper, created an empire of 30 newspapers, and then vilified cannabis by calling it marijuana. And that's why I don't say marijuana anymore. I see it as a racist propagated term, but it's that's where they vilified it. And that's why, like, people who are stoners who say there's no medical value to cannabis, like, I just want to get stoned. I'm like, you're doing what Anslinger wanted. He had to kill its name as a medicine before he could kill cannabis. And that's why they switched to marijuana, because everyone knew cannabis and hemp as such great medicines. And the 1937 Tax Act was actually vehemently opposed by the American Medical Association at the time. And the physicians knew cannabis as cannabis. They didn't know it was marijuana. So they didn't understand that this tax act, when it passed, was going to jeopardize access to cannabis for their patients, or they probably would have been up in arms too. And the sad thing is, they actually still had the ability to prescribe cannabis at the time too, but they made it so freaking difficult. You had to jump through 50 different hoops. You had to get 50 different approvals just in order to prescribe one. And so they just decided to stop using cannabis. It was so sad.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. I saw a story too about Ford, and he had created steel out of hemp and made a car with it back in the. So, I mean, and I know, like, in the 16 and 1700s, when we were founding this country, there were laws that said if you have land, you must grow hemp. I'm
going to put it up again on this video, but there's a video of him with that hemp car smashing it with a hammer. I had it on another video, but I'll put it up here too. But he's got like a 4-pound hammer. I think it's Ford watching another guy do it, and he's just smashing the back of this car with his hammer, and he wipes his hand over it. No dents. Yeah,
amazing. Yeah, Tesla should get onto that, huh?
I agree. But this is the thing that kills me. Their X, I used to get, it's so alleviating and so nice when you get something that works perfectly. But other times you can get something that's very enjoyable, but you can tell you're not benefiting from it. Like you'll get that 2 hours. Okay, this was fun. But after those 2 hours, you're like, I'm not benefiting from it. I don't feel any better. I want to get high again so I can just enjoy it again, instead of that okay, I now my stress is leveled out. I can feel better. I don't need as much. I don't need to feel high.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, and for pain, like there are so many different answers. Like people think you need THC for pain, but not necessarily. Like the combination of CBD and CBG together is excellent for pain. I love THCA because I have a lot of inflammatory type of pain. Those are great for daytime. They're not intoxicating. You can be fully functional and even have your function optimized because you're not battling the pain, which is so exhausting. So, I mean, there's definitely a lot of different options, depending on what somebody is struggling with that might be helpful. Part of what I do, I'm going to start actually consulting with patients again next week after I graduate from my herbalism course. And one of the things I try to do, in addition to helping them find good, products that fit their needs and, schedule around any pharmaceuticals is to be sure that, they have a good regimen and non-intoxicating during the day so you can fully function, intoxicating at night. I really feel like that is one of the best remedies to this trend of people being diagnosed with an addiction disorder, the cannabis use disorder label. I feel like, most of those patients have not had the benefit of competent medical guidance to help them find a regimen that is appropriate and gives them relief during the day and at night and helps them be the most functional possible. So I feel like there's such an advantage to that. So, yeah, and I can send you that link too if you have people that want to.
And I want everyone to know, I've been using cannabis for 15 years. I feel like I have a lot of medical professionals. I'll say things and they're like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. You're saying it. And I want to learn more. I want Janna and the people she's talking about. I want to learn from them. I want to learn how I can better. I'm probably never going to stop enjoying, but I want to learn how to better target my issues so that I don't feel like I need it. That's where I think everyone should be. I think we should all benefit from it, but I don't think that we should feel the need to have it.
Yeah.
And that is something somewhere I think a lot of people lose focus. They just think I'm going to smoke weed until I die. And I'm just like, I'm probably going to use for the rest of my life just because I enjoy it, but I don't want that. I want to be able to go a week without it and not feel like I need it. I want to be able to stop and not, that's an issue with me is even if I don't need it, I worry because I'm like, what if something happens and I do need it and I don't have it with me? And then that will trigger a lot of my issues. And I like it when I have something where I don't feel like that. I'm like, okay, everything's going well. I feel good. And I'll notice, I'm like, this is a good strain. I don't feel that stress. I don't feel that anxiety.
Yeah. And I think, as a nurse, I always encouraged a holistic approach for patients. It's not all about the cannabis. The cannabis should not be your only medicine
tool,
and not even medicine, but your only intervention. I think it's important that we're looking at lifestyle and stress management techniques, and diet and exercise. A lot of other things can be mitigated that actually help the cannabis to work better. Just meditating or praying or gardening. My husband goes fishing when he's stressed out. Just managing your stress can actually allow the cannabis to come in and do some of the deeper balancing work. Because the first thing it's going to do is mitigate your stress response. So if you have that taken care of, you give the cannabis a better opportunity to do that deeper work that you're after. If you're eating organically and exercising and avoiding other toxic influences, there are going to be fewer imbalances for the cannabis to try to promote homeostasis around. And so that's going to also help the cannabis work better. And I do have a few select patients that have graduated cannabis therapy and just feel like they don't need it anymore. They have figured out how to maintain that state without the cannabis. And I really think, for a lot of people, that is attainable. For myself, because mine is genetic and there's not a lot I can do about it. Otherwise, I'll probably be on cannabis the rest of my life. So we see both.
The way I'm described, when I told the people at the VA about my experiences in Afghanistan, they said, you have chronic PTSD. And I said, you're sure? And yeah, you're the worst case I've ever seen. I am in a small area, so and they're probably new, but still, that showed me the gravity. I always saw myself as other people are way worse than me. Mine wasn't that bad. Yada yada yada. You tell other people who don't have the experience, and they're like, oh my gosh, trust me, it's that bad.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I would be happy to consult with you. I'll do a call with you if you'd like me to listen to what's going on and make some suggestions. I'd be happy to do that. So
that would be great. And I would love to show people that how I use it for the specific PTSD and TBI and not just for fun.
right.
And it's one thing I've always hesitated talking about because I am not a medical professional. I know it can be very dangerous that somebody said, I learned this from Jay. He told it. He said to do this. So I'm very weary about that, but I do. I do get a lot of benefit, but I can't recreate it very well. I could when I could grow my own. I don't grow my own anymore. I'm in a different state.
I don't either, yeah.
So I don't grow my own anymore, and it's a lot more difficult to medicate yourself when you, like Janna said, when you can't get the same type of medication. I mean, think of any other treatment, and you're being given. Take my benzodiazepines. My issue when I started switching to opiates and harder drugs was because they wouldn't refill my benzodiazepines, because eventually, of course, I started using more than I needed because I would get used to it. I'd feel like I needed. I'd get in crowds. I'd just start popping them like candy because it would always say 4 times a day or as needed.
Right. I know. It's terrible.
And that was football. Yeah. Those football Xanaxes 4 times a day on top of clonazepam and trazodone.
Wow. And you're off all of them now?
Zombie.
Yeah. And so you're off all of them now thanks to cannabis?
I am 100% organic. I don't like doing preservatives, additives, sugars. I do sugar alcohols. I tried to become as organic as I could, and I couldn't. I am so much happier. My mind is clearer, but it's also worse in other ways just because I'm doing so much more, and my mind is, as a man, for one, we don't do well with multiple things. And then with my other issues, I mean, you say, my wife will say, okay, I want you to type this, hello. And I'll be typing. She'll say something else. I go, ugh, I'm not done with hello. You stop.
Yeah. I've heard the comparison of men's and women's brains, that men's brains are full of boxes.
Yep.
And they like their boxes to be one
thing at a time
in the box, and it's not touching the sides of the other boxes. Everything's separate. And women's minds are more like the internet and a network where everything's connected. Everything.
No matter what. See, like, I think you watched the exact same video that I watched. He was like, when we're talking about your mom and my dad, there's no connection whatsoever. They're separated, but not with the woman. It's right there, connected. But I can see where he gets that from with my wife and I. She even says it. I'll clean the house, and I do what she does in 3 hours takes me 3 days. I have to do one thing and make sure it's really done well. She gets it. She's got like a tool belt. She's got a basket, and she's doing 15 things at once. I'm just sitting there going, no.
If only we could grow more arms, we would be even more efficient.
It's amazing what women can do. I grew up with 6 women in my household, and I can sit here and say women are brilliant. They're much smarter than men, or can be at least, but they're also more cruel. Yes, I had 2 brothers, and they were nothing. They were physically harmful, but my sisters, they mentally,
mean girls. Some of them can be.
Oh yes, relentless.
I have some wonderful female friends that are very kind people, but I have also seen the other kind, so I definitely be a factor.
But yes, no, I am not one. I know that we all have ways that we I don't look down on any sex or anybody or any person. That's what I'm trying to get at.
It's a good thing to be challenged. I feel like relationships that challenge us also promote the most growth. So I think there's that as well, to have somebody that's an intellectual equal that you can bounce things off of, and and my husband and I are very, very different people at our core, but we're both very intelligent and just can connect on that level a lot, and throw out different ideas and hash them out, and talk about different subjects. So it's good. It keeps the brain functioning, I think.
I learned this from Boy Meets World. And that is, you don't make a peanut butter and peanut butter sandwich. You make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. That's what goes together. You don't want two of the same person.
Yeah. My husband's a construction contractor.
I used to do that. I used to do construction. I was in the military, and now some of my best friends are hippies. Which I will say this: I never had hippie friends when I was younger. I was the most opposite thing you could find from a hippie. Even still, people will say I look the furthest thing from a stoner. And I'm like, looks. I have learned this. You don't judge people by their covers.
Yeah. And I predict if the electrical grid goes down, like you were talking about earlier, that hunting animals for food is going to become really popular again.
I had one guy, he called me stupid for wanting to teach my kids how to hunt. And I said, why? And he goes, because we have computers. And I said, you're right. But how easy is it for that computer to not work? It's so much. People think that our power grid is impenetrable. And it's like, we barely even have security around it.
Yeah. Well, especially in this world with all the uncertainty and all of, the conflict, that's a major target. And our enemies know that. So people should be prepared. You should have several days worth of food and water in your possession, ready to go, have wood to burn for heat. Just think about, when the lights go out, how that changes everything that we rely upon. We don't have our washer and dryer. We don't have our dishwasher. We don't have lights. We don't have heat. We don't have any way to sustain ourselves. So we go back to the dark ages, literally, when that happens. And being prepared is a really good idea in times like this. And we look back at other, war eras, World War I, World War II, how people lived, how people survived, how it impacted our society. And we're at risk of that right now. We're at risk of repeating that trend.
I was listening to a fellow...
I'm not a fearful person at all, and I don't mean to scare anybody, but that's just the reality right now. And the people that are prepared are going to be up the creek, So
I was listening to a fellow from Ethiopia, and he was talking about how people here are just they have no idea about like protein, because everyone will say, oh, you don't need like meat protein, yada yada yada. It's easy enough to get the protein from plants. It is in our society, but you go anywhere else and they are malnourished because they don't have the meat protein that we do. They don't have the dairy that we do. If they have cows, they're very hoarded. It's just amazing when you see the differences. And he's like, people will say, look, they're all healthy over there. And it's like, no, we're all starving to death. Mm-hmm. It's not that we're healthy. I mean, we would die for a steak. It's just that all we have is plant protein.
Yeah. Yeah. And thankfully, the cannabis plant and the seeds especially are full of protein. It used to be a food source for us. So once again, we should
It's one of the best proteins in the plant world I've found out.
Yep. And you can feed it to livestock to keep them alive. And then you get all the cannabinoid content in the meat and the eggs and the milk,
You know what the diascale is?
No, I haven't heard of that.
That's the protein diascale. It's basically saying how good of a protein it is. And milk is like 89% for a diascale.
Nice.
The cannabis proteins, I think, were at 54 or 60%. And so it's very high for plant protein.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was very interesting to find out.
Yeah.
And then you can make hemp milk with seeds. With seeds, water, and just putting some seasonings in it. I can't wait to try that.
I put the shelled hemp seeds in my protein bar recipe. I make these little protein bars, nut butters, and all kinds of good ingredients.
Isn't the first recipe for that, isn't that bong in India? So I'm pretty sure that's how they describe bong, is using, but I think they use the stems and the flower and the seeds. And then mix it in milk and something else. sound very similar to the hemp milk.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know people that actually just eat the leaves and the flowers like a vegetable. They eat it like a salad. They'll eat it raw. And it's so nutritional. And,
I
you know, I'm
wanted to.
too with my curricula for nutrition students, how that crossover, it's vital nutrients in this plant. So
I would like to have you back on, and maybe somebody else, because I've done a video really early on. It's really crappy, but about juicing cannabis and the benefits of it, because I've just seen the THCA and it's promising to kill or attack. They like find and attack cancer cells.
yes,
Is what I've seen.
It's also 20 times the anti-inflammatory effect of aspirin, which is about twice that of prednisone. No side effects like prednisone has. I mean, it's a wonderful answer. So THCA is very nutrient dense. It's really good for you. So yeah.
Oh man, yes.
And I'm happy to come back time. Just let me know.
I just feel like we can't. I was like, a second podcast, sure enough, we'll be able to get all of it in. And nope, of course not. There's so much to talk about. But you're easy to talk to. I didn't even realize it's been as long as it has. So we could go ahead and wrap this up. I hate keeping you for so long.
No, you're fine. You're fine. Did you have more questions? Or did we get them all?
Yeah. And next time, don't hesitate. You know, if you want to ask me anything, you know, just to get the perspective of an idiot, that'd be great. I have no problem giving my perspective.
Yeah, I wasn't prepared. Sorry.
Oh, you're good. I need to start shaking. So I used to share all my points with my guests beforehand, but I noticed it just seemed it seemed noticeable. And so I like it to be on the cuff a bit more, but I could share generalities with you so that you could be a little bit more prepared. So maybe I'll do that for the next one.
I don't mind. I'm pretty good at shooting from the hip. So
you're great. You do an amazing job.
Thank you.
All right. Well, let's thank Janna for coming. Thank you, Janna. And now, don't forget to like, subscribe, and let us know what you think. If you have any questions for Janna or myself on any of the subjects that we've covered today, I know it's a lot, but please let us know. And now, as always, Jay, it's going to go have a J.
Bye.